Hi everyone, this is episode 105 of Rolling Through Negotiations. It's October 2025 that we're recording this one in. I'm Matthew Karaklarkis. I'm the host of Rolling Through Negotiations. This very week, this episode, we're speaking with Jahna Cedar. Jahna's a Nyiyaparli woman. She does heaps of work in consulting, in governance, in leadership and reconciliation. She's got heaps of experience as a director. She's a global keynote speaker and she's also a TEDx presenter. This episode's an excellent one because we go into principles of cultural leadership plus much, much more. I think you're going to really love this episode, especially if governance, empowerment and Aboriginal leadership is what you're passionate about. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of these lands. Let's pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Let's roll. So welcome to the podcast, sister.
Thank you so much.
You do tons of work with community and you do a lot of work in terms of empowering mob. How do you see empowerment, education and negotiation in terms of creating pathways for the future?
Empowerment is such a contentious word because in a way it's almost that we have been disempowered at some stage. And so now we're trying to regain that power. And I would like to say that our ancestors have fought for so long that they've always had power. And what I'm pushing now is through education, teaching people how to step into that power with confidence, with grace, knowing that that space is there for them. But how do we reclaim that space in a way that is completely authentic in who we are, whilst also trying to navigate the complexities of walking in both worlds?
And walking in two worlds is something that I know you speak about a bit. But what does it really mean at its core to be walking in two worlds?
Well, for me, I am a product of 60,000 years of ongoing, evolving, thriving culture, but also a product of colonization. And so as a result of that, I walk in a Western world, but I also have a cultural world. And with that has kinship, roles, responsibilities, obligations. Sometimes this Western world and this cultural world, they will clash. And so that's where we talk sometimes of walking in that grey space. It potentially could be a third world where we're being pulled in a Western system against a cultural system. And so part of the education is how do we get our non-Indigenous allies to understand that sometimes we are bound by complexities and tensions that are hard to explain, but is inherent within us because of culture.
And I think a really interesting place where that comes into it as well is, for example, when we look at things like health for First Nations peoples, often the integration in that is in a way of saying, hey, let's put white mainstream westernized approaches to these kinds of things to help Aboriginal people. And so sometimes I wonder whether a great place of seeing better health for Aboriginal peoples would be in a way of restoring and trying to recapture and re-ingrain, reconnect with the traditional ways rather than further forgetting those and imposing westernized health structures on mob. Have you ever thought about that sort of stuff, sis? And I'd just love to know what your views on that might be.
Yeah, just hearing you say what spurs within me these thoughts of how can we move to working in partnership, leverage the strength. The reason we are a thriving culture is because we come with such richness, particularly around our health, particularly around our governance structures. So what can a Western society learn from what is already existing out there? It's about moving from that either or to almost a and both. It doesn't need to be one or the other. It's how can we actually combine, unite, and bring the best of both worlds and both learnings. It's only going to be community at the end of the day that are going to reap the benefits of that.
Yeah, and I think that when people speak about reconciliation, which is another one of those buzzwords, right?
Yeah.
But let's go with that word anyway, because we forget the meaning of these kinds of words, like we were saying, all right? And they carry sometimes popular cliche type meaning, and we'll carry that one, right? The reconciliation word. Okay. Do you believe that if we're ever going to see Aboriginal communities, Aboriginal peoples and white peoples coming together as one to make this country of Australia realise its full beautiful potential, it absolutely requires an appreciation for Aboriginal cultures, an appreciation for Aboriginal wisdoms. And sometimes the appreciation can be forgotten because of all of the devastation and the closing the gap metrics and all the disparity that exists. Through that, sometimes there can be a forgetting of the strengths and the wisdoms and the empowering places where culture makes such a amazing difference. And if we can remember these things, if we can see more non-Aboriginal people reach into and be motivated to learn and be inspired by the strengths of Aboriginal peoples. That's something that needs to happen to make Australia great.
Yeah. And, I'll probably throw a spanner in the works and get some hate mail for it. But we also need to understand that as a people, we need to reconcile with each other because lateral violence is alive and thriving in our community. There's a difference between lateral violence and accountability, and I want to make that clear. But this whole jealousy space of tall poppy syndrome, how can we expect Western allies to take us seriously and respect us when we are struggling as a generalization in doing so ourselves? Once we can make peace with ourselves and have a strong unified voice, then obviously we are going with more power, being able to reclaim these spaces. But more importantly, I guess it's moving the outcomes then from some of the economic gain to that cultural continuity, which is what we're always about. It's preservation of culture, languages, law, and some of these health outcomes. So as a people, I think we need to come together first and really sort our own stuff out because it's hard to be taken seriously when we're trying to attack each other over ridiculous things.
And you do a lot of work in governance and governance within Aboriginal corporations. Do you see lateral violence as an issue that comes up that can affect the good governance of community through Aboriginal corporations?
I think so. I've seen where people are afraid to put their hands up to be on boards out of fear of lateral violence. And sometimes these people are the most skilled and equipped and qualified people for those roles. But I also think that, again, it's around how do we create safe spaces for our mob to step into leadership, knowing that there's supportive environments around them. And the loudest voices aren't always necessarily the best voices. So that safe space to fall and fail is where we're going to be able to do better within our corporations. How do we create that method of safety for it to occur?
Yeah, and this is definitely where the power of negotiations comes into it as well, because sometimes lateral violence happens through people being frustrated, unable to communicate properly, unable to listen to each other properly, unable to empathise, and there can be a whole heap of reasons and systemic issues that come up through that as well. But I believe that if we can have our leaders better placed and better resourced in terms of being able to negotiate, being able to listen, being able to communicate respectfully, but also assertively, this can make a real difference in terms of putting different views forwards, respecting other people's views and negotiating better outcomes in the process.
Yeah, and I think we need to move with, emotional intelligence as well. So what self-awareness do we have individuals and what right do we even have to judge somebody else? Let's check our own backyard first. Let's create opportunities for younger generation to step into spaces. Let's not have gatekeepers in place. And a lot of lateral violence stems from frustrations, as you were saying, through miscommunication. So let's have transparent and authentic communications within our corporations. No secret squirrel business, but all working for the collective benefit of all members. That's a vision that I firmly think that we're definitely going to get to. Just some organizations are already there and leading by best practice. So let's continue to share the success messages as well, because we appreciate that in general, the media wants to always portray us within a negative space. Let's rechange and reclaim a positive narrative by sharing some success stories that are out there of these world-class leaders that we have in our own communities.
Yeah, for people that might be listening in right now that may not be as familiar with the term governance and what it means and what it stands for, can you explain a bit about what governance is and also where we can see amazing governance outcomes?
So
what
governance
happens in good governance?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, again, it comes down to what lens are you looking through? Is it corporate governance? Corporate governance is the roles, systems, policies, legislations that our businesses are bound by, that we're regulated through the Corporations Act or the CATSI Act if we're under ORIC. And it's what we, almost like a Bible, our rule book or constitution that tells us what we can and cannot do within a business. It also then stems across who's sitting on our boards, what duties they carry to sit on those boards, and how they steer the strategy of a business moving forward. And then when you think about cultural governance, well, part of that is, well, what are the kinship responsibilities that we have potentially because of skin groups or family dynamics? Where does that sit? And this is where LORE comes into play. How do we operate within our own ways of being, knowing, and doing within communities, and appreciating that protocols are going to be different? There's so many nations of us within Australia as First Nations people. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach, but it's understanding who has cultural authority in decision-making, moving to collective decision-making. How is one community going to make a decision and who has been appointed to do so, which may be different to a community which is 100 or 200 k's down the road. So yeah, it's understanding the relationships that we have with each other within a nation and how we're going to build that nation.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people don't understand and don't remember that governance is something the Aboriginal communities have been doing extremely well for 65,000 plus years. Because like you were saying, the meaning of governance, the systems, the norms, the protocols in terms of decision-making, in terms of the way the community's being looked after through the processes that have been established and set up, no civilization could possibly last without those infrastructures in place. And so
Absolutely.
I think sometimes Aboriginal people think of governance being, that's a white man's thing that's been put into play. But in fact, amazing governance is something that I believe Aboriginal peoples inherently have an understanding of. And sometimes it's just about remembering that and flicking that light switch on to understand what this is all about.
Yeah, I can't agree more. We have the most amazing frameworks of governance that have survived, and therefore, how can we continue to utilize that and find a way for it to coexist within a corporate governance space? As you and I, there's some tensions when in that area. Sometimes kinship responsibilities may not align with director duties or the ways of a corporate governance. So then what do we do in that area? How can we make it coexist with policies? And I think that's what the important role moving forward to break some of the myths and fears around what governance is to find ways for both of these worlds to coexist.
Yeah, and sometimes you see some pretty dodgy things that might have happened within a corporation. I think sometimes the excuse that the wrongdoer, particularly when they're mob, like to use is something along the lines of, that's bloody white man's stuff. But I think that if you're on a board or if you're involved in a governance structure, it's important to always remember that, no, looking after the community has always been good governance. And so whenever there's a situation of taking something for yourself and community loses as a result, that's not in line with good, proper governance.
Yeah, and there's some amazing examples of where it has coexisted really, really well. Some of our PBCs have set up elder advisory councils and youth advisory councils. It's looking at decision-making from all ends of demographics, really representative of the communities in which they serve. And again, it's taking that cultural authority and leadership from our elders, listening with heart, with mind, with ears, sharing knowledge with our youth, but then also our youth impart some beautiful knowledge to our elders about what it looks like today. It's a different world to when we were raised, let alone to when our elders were raised. And so, we've shown that there is a place for everybody, which is what needs to happen now within mainstream businesses. We're thinking around cultural governance. Well, mainstream need to take it seriously too. Don't just put culture within a HR policy, but it needs a seat at the decision-making table. It's more than just a tick the box. Yes, I've got a policy, I've got a wrap. No, how are you living it? How are you bringing it to life? And how are you keeping yourself accountable to what you've signed up for?
Yeah, and you mentioned culture and the next generation in these sorts of governance structures and the change that needs to take place from one generation to the next. How can we properly have the influence from the elders to the young leaders coming up the ranks and leading us into the future? How can we have this proper transition of respect and taking care of culture through this process? Have you got any ideas on that, Jan?
I think you've said it in respect. I've seen it good and bad. There's definitely parts of different communities where that respect is lacking from how I was raised to respect and serve and humble yourself before elders. But then again, like I've said previously, there's some beautiful examples of where that relationship is thriving and amazing, and the sharing of knowledge is fantastic. It just really needs to bring back the respect and the authority that comes with elders and cherish the libraries of knowledge that they are, and then start developing relationships. Elders are not going to want to pass on knowledge if there's no trust, rapport, or relationship that's in place. Starting from a place of empathy and acknowledging what they have been through and what they have come from and their resilience and their confidence, understanding that and sitting and learning and listening with them and not expecting that just because you've got to a certain age, it's going to be all given to you. No, you need to earn that right. And that just comes with that investment in quality time and relationship with our mob. Our elders bring such amazing empathy and truth-telling and connection. So how can we sit in that space? And it may be uncomfortable sometimes as young people because we like to think we know everything. But actually sitting and humbling ourselves and said, no, I don't. I want to learn from you. I want to cherish the knowledge that you have. And I want to be able to then create legacy and continue legacy for the next generations to come.
You speak about leadership through this and through the transition and caring for culture, keeping these infrastructures in place. There's great words of leadership you're speaking here. And I think that it's incredible whenever I have a chance to yarn with somebody like you, because being an Aboriginal woman, you're definitely the minority of the minority. But what I'm wondering is, what does it really feel like to be an Aboriginal woman?
If I was to say, look, I will say that I feel blessed and honoured because I'm carrying the stories of those that have gone before me and hopefully creating space for those that are yet to come. That's what I'm all about. But it is not easy, particularly because I have fairer skin. So with that has imposter, it comes, I get challenged. The whole, Anita Heiss, am I black enough for you? Do I actually fit in being able to support and serve my community? But ultimately, too, it means that I need to be even stronger in my own identity to stand firm in who I am, to be able to give the best of myself to others. We as Aboriginal women are such strategic assets. We juggle so many things. We are trying to carry the weight of community or family or of corporates if we're in work. We also know that we're bringing, that community kinship responsibilities and lived experiences to the table as well. And so doing everything with the best of intent for the collective effort, not for self-effort. And I think we need to, as women, advance in supporting each other more rather than, again, some of that tall poppy syndrome, because it is such an isolating space. And when we do have a platform and we do have privilege, using that to better support those who may not have those same opportunities, who can we take on that journey with us? How can we create a huge group of Aboriginal leaders to continue to support the development of communities and children? I'm definitely all about how do I give back to my fellow sisters, aunties and nieces, because strong women are creating the basis of strong families, which therefore means strong communities.
Yeah, and helping each other shine in the process. And like you were saying, this journey, this growth, this support for Aboriginal women to be able to help each other, lift each other up and not be deterred by a word like tall poppy syndrome. I think that sort of thinking of needing to pull people down is really not productive thinking, but instead let's lift each other up in that process like you're speaking. I think that's a beautiful place to be coming from now into the future.
And also, how do we, let's smash this thing about being shamed all the time. Actually, no, my sister, you shine. You are amazing. Let's celebrate your successes. Let's each celebrate each other's successes. Again, let's saturate what's happening out there in conversation in media with such positive stories about amazing women leaders. The more that we are seen and the more that the younger female generation have got something to aspire to. They've got positive role models that may not always have to be celebrities. They are grassroots people in community that through celebrating their own successes, they're like, I can be like her. Like she's like me. She comes from where I come from. And we should never be seen as trying to compete with each other. The power is in the collective. So let's actually unify and move together and support one another in being able to move forward.
Yeah, I think a big part of this as well is about self-love, recognizing how beautiful you are as a person, recognizing and understanding that every single person has their own strengths and weaknesses. And I think that when we can understand this, it allows us to forgive others more. Because when we experience a moment that could be somebody else's weakness, we don't judge them and we don't say, this person is this kind of a person just because we've been caught up in a moment of their weakness. And likewise, we don't downgrade ourselves because we're comparing each other and other people and ourselves against others in their moments of strength. But I think instead, this is where lifting each other up can really come into it, that we support each other, we embrace each other, we accept the weaknesses and strengths of others, and we love ourselves in the process instead of what can happen in these days. For example, we see something on social media and then we start thinking that, oh, we're not quite as good because this person's done X, Y, Z. No, let's be inspired by what somebody else is doing, whether they be out there in community in the real life or whether they be there on social media. If they are doing something that we think, that's amazing, I'd love to be doing that, let's not pull ourselves down. Let's instead use it as the opportunity of seeing that it is possible. And let's not downgrade others or speak poorly of others because they might have faltered, because we're all humans after all. And I think we have to support each other as mob in all of these, in all these ways.
Love that. Ultimately, like, we're leading with head and heart. How can we move to a place where intellect is going to guide our decisions? And if we can humble ourselves, nobody is perfect. And so we're all got opportunities to improve, but let's celebrate where we are real deadly. And if there's areas that we can improve, that's where we've got opportunities also to partner or to leverage each other's strengths and work together on things. It shouldn't never feel like I'm better than anybody else. At the end of the day, we are all amazing individuals. We've come from such a rich background of people. So now let's advance that and celebrate one another. Like I said, just continue to celebrate each other. There's so many things that are out there against us that we don't need to be against ourselves.
And as we go on this journey of celebrating each other, as we collaborate, as we bring alignment of culture together, can we use these kinds of strategies, do you think, to help us in our negotiations?
Absolutely. Not only do we have lived experience, but we've got an ideal reality of negotiating commercially, but also with cultural continuity. When we're getting upset or irritated into different negotiations, what we need to be considering then is not about them, but what is it inside of me that is causing this to arise? Have that self-reflection, have that self-accountability and awareness to go, this doesn't sit right because there's something in me. It's probably, maybe it's not values-based. Maybe it's against what I've been taught is correct. Maybe it's not against my responsibilities to community, and start questioning it through that lens rather than through a defensive attack type of mechanism. And going into negotiations, we have such a great opportunity to, as I said, not just listen, but to actively listen. Don't listen to respond, but listen to truly hear what is being said, but also what is not being said in negotiations. People aren't going to tell you everything up front. So knowing how to read body language, knowing what type of questions to ask, and always remaining completely grounded within that grassroots, what is best for community, not what is best for myself.
And if we wrap this episode up now, but before we do, we give people that may be out there in community the opportunity of one takeaway golden message. What would you like that message to be?
I think true leadership is about aligning our voices, yes, with what we say, but also what we value. And so saying yes to growth is important, but also saying yes to integrity. Always stay true to who you are and what you know in anything that you do.
It's beautiful having you on Rolling Through Negotiations. You're so deadly, your work is deadly, and keep on looking after our communities, looking after mob, doing the work that you do.
Thank you, brother, for your leadership.
I love this mutual respect that we can have as Aboriginal people coming together like this and supporting each other in the work that we do for the collective good for our communities. So it's beautiful. If you've enjoyed this episode, remember to like, share, subscribe, and follow Rolling Through Negotiations so we can keep on bringing you fantastic episodes just like this one. Us.